In the deserts of North Africa, undying fame enfolded its glory round a number. Number 8, the 8th Army. In France and Belgium and Germany, it is the 2nd. No less honor must be done to an army that fights in and with the jungle, the 14th Army in Burma.
Hello. Hearing you. 2 down, 8 letters, warship. One let's copy and see it down online. Yeah, so I'm James Pritchett, and our group is called Take Your Mepacrine. We're representing the 14th Army in Burma, fighting Japanese, circa 1944-45. We are B Company of battalion of the Lancashire Fusiliers, and we've just got a bit of a setup here to show you different things that we would have had in the jungle, as well as a forward unit there. It's always a selection of different stuff. This is just stationary kind of command items and a few captured Japanese bits as well. The army was defeated in Singapore, Malaya, Burma, and pushed out to India in 41-42. And did a fighting retreat right through Burma back into India. The army was really reformed by General William Slim, who essentially created the 14th Army out of the residue of what was able to retreat, and formed it into a very highly competent jungle fighting force that destroyed the myth of the Japanese Superman, and the idea that the Japanese were excellent at jungle warfare. 14th Army became really superior to the Japanese of fighting in the jungle. Once they learned out how to do it, defeat is a great teacher, and they would go through to fight the Japanese at twin battles of Kohima and Imphal, among others. Kohima and Imphal is sort of known as the Stalingrad of the East, and it was the largest defeat inflicted on the Japanese in total. The Burma campaign, the Japanese army lost more men there than any other fighting in the Far East.
After their heavy defeat at Arakan, the Japanese attempt another big gamble, this time an attack against Imphal, capital of the state of Manipur. The main fighting so far has occurred along the roads, where the Japanese try to prevent concentration of our forces against them by setting up roadblocks. Our tanks and infantry knock the enemy off the roadblocks before they have time to dig themselves in.
And in the Mayu Range, which Tokyo had been celebrating as a great victory, British and Indian troops turned the table.
So the equipment we have is very similar to the standard British infantryman in any theatre of war, apart from the clothing and a couple of bits of equipment. So our clothing consists of lightweight trousers and an Airtex shirt, which is made of a lightweight material, which is breathable and soaks up sweat nice and easily for when you're in jungle conditions. So this is slightly different from the standard infantryman. In order to make it myself less clear to the Japanese that I am an officer, I have changed some elements. So rather than having my pistol pouch here, I've replaced that with a standard ammunition pouch for my usual weapon, and I've moved my pistol to the back here. On the right hand side, I've got my binoculars pouch and my compass pouch, which are standard British officer equipment, and on the back a water bottle. Often you do see troops in Burma carrying 2 water bottles, or sometimes carrying a water bottle and their mess kits in a water bottle. The small pack is a standard British issue small pack. In this you would have waterproof clothing, additional socks, personal equipment like toothbrush, shaving equipment, things like that. And additional clothing. Each man would carry 2 shirts, and each man would carry 2 sets of trousers, because they tended to rot very quickly in the damp jungle conditions.
We often, of course, have a slouch hat, which is well known. We're a British unit. But we wear the South hat, most did, though we often get questions asking if we're Australians, but we're not. But a lot of people assume we are because of the hat, but everyone wore hats like this in the jungle because it makes sense. It's someone once described it as part hotel, part umbrella. You can live in these things, and they keep the rain off you and do everything in it.
Mopping up of snipers left behind by the Japanese. As the major battles to the west roll out their thunder, this is the second act of a great Eastern drama. The star is that little man who got shoved around in the first act, but always refuses to be beaten.
The British Army, the 14th Army, eventually became a very diverse group. So you had troops from Britain. We portray a British division, second division. But there were West Africans, East Africans, Indians, of course, as well as some Burmese there. Oh, thank you. And a lot of the kit was adapted to the jungle. So it's number 5 carbine, which is like the number 4 Enfield, but it's cut down, it's lighter, shorter. And so that's specially adapted for jungle warfare. Indeed. So we've got the length of the number 4 here. And you get an idea of the difference in size and the build of them. Sergeant Major. Thank you.
The other specialist bit of kit we have is the Mark III Bren down here. Pass me that. Thank you. This again is a shortened and lightweight version of the Bren gun. So the barrel has been reduced by a couple of inches, and it's been made considerably lighter. This was mainly used by paratroopers and jungle specialists, and saw use during 1945 out in Burma. But apart from that, it's pretty much the same thing as the regular Bren.
Impossible country in which to fight a major war. A succession of hills, all crazily alike, all smothered in the same bewildering wilderness. Every twisted strand of vegetation and every leaf can conceal a Jap, and most of them do. And they've got to be watched endlessly, and after watching, they've got to be cleared out.
But yeah, the jungle's really as much the enemy as Japanese, and the conditions for most of Burma, well, a lot of Burma is dense jungle. Primary jungle is where it's naturally grown. Secondary jungle is when it's been cleared and it's grown back even denser. So either way, it's quite dense stuff. And if you're dealing with that, you want a shorter, lighter rifle, you've got to move a long way through the bush. And if you're in close quarters, you don't want your rifle to be catching on as much, so you have a shorter, cut-down rifle like this, which just comes in much more handy. But it kicks like a mule, so because it's lighter. So there's that.
The Far East Theatre also included a lot more close combat weapons, as fighting in there was often rather close and brutal. So most men would have some sort of close combat weapon. Either a Gurkha kukri, if they served alongside Gurkhas, or some sort of machete. This is a short British machete. They also used longer American machetes, which went up to 14-inch blades. Mainly used for clearing, but could also be used as a weapon in case.
The foulest of climates, hot and steamy, soaked with every imaginable germ that carries discomfort and saps a man's strength. Every yard of the way is a yard over which supplies must be carried, food and water and ammunition. They say an army marches on its stomach, but in Burma it marches on its own indomitable will, the will to keep alive, to beat the Jap, to beat the climate and the loneliness and the drenching, never-ending rain. That's a brief and very inadequate picture of the job they're doing for us many thousand miles from home. In Burma, the 14th Army.
In the jungle, you're fighting the jungle as much as you are the Japanese. In fact, the biggest killer is probably disease in the jungle itself. So usually malaria, that's a big killer. Our group, Take Your Mepacrine, is named after Mepacrine, which is an anti-malarial drug. And soldiers didn't like taking it because they thought it made you sterile and turned you yellow, but neither was really true. So there were lots of orders to make sure that you took your Mepacrine, because that would save your life. We're talking about, in 43, 200% loss rates in a unit due to malaria. So turnover was huge, guys becoming ill with malaria, until discipline really improved with taking anti-malarial drugs, using mosquito nets, not bathing after dark, things like that.
One of the main things was anti-malaria pills. Each man would have to take anti-malaria drugs every day in an attempt to cut down on malaria problems, because jungle tropical diseases were rife. More men were put out of action by things like malaria or dysentery than they were by actual enemy fire. And it wasn't uncommon for men to fight through with jungle tropical diseases. You often see reference to men cutting holes in their trousers when they had dysentery so they could fight with dysentery, which isn't particularly pleasant, but it was done. Apart from that, the day-to-day was very much similar to your standard British infantryman anywhere. The only other bit of kind of interesting thing was you had to make sure to check your boots for snakes and other creepy crawlies before you put them on.
Now, how long would they roughly tend to be out in the jungle at a time?
It depends on the unit, it depends on the year. Usually a fair few months your unit would be deployed. Again, it very varied as far as I understand it. Get chaps up who would be deployed for more or less the front line for a year or more. But rotating sort of to a rear area is still deployed in the jungle. And there'd be facilities set up for them as the battle line moved back through Burma, down through Burma, as the Japanese withdrew. Because the Japanese, certainly after the Yugo offensive, which is early 44, their supply lines are completely destroyed, really. Their logistics is terrible. They're starving en masse. And you get the Road of Bones, which is where the whole Japanese army withdrawing down through Burma, chaps dying at the head of the column. By the time the back of the column reached them, they'd be decomposing into bones, and it was known as Road of Bones. So very grim warfare, really grim conditions in the jungle. Certainly compared to Europe. In Europe, the war's bad enough, but try doing that in the jungle. It's good.
Supplies are a major problem in any war. In jungle fighting, they're the biggest problem of all. At one time on the Arakan front, part of the 14th Army was completely cut off. Supplies could only be delivered by air. But this kind of land-air cooperation has now reached a high pitch of efficiency in Burma. Enormous quantities were packed with parachutes into transport planes for dropping into the lines of our surrounded soldiers. So well was the air cargo service maintained that throughout a 20-day battle the soldiers never ran short.
The 14th Army was increasingly resupplied by air. So because of jungle conditions, a lot of the roads are not navigable during the monsoon season, certainly, when roads wash out, and the jungle's quite thick anyway, so it's often difficult to get a decent road system, so supplies have to come in by air. And certainly by 45, or really by mid-44, certain divisions, all divisions are being resupplied by air, using Dakota and so on. So air power was hugely important for the 14th Army. By the time the Americans and the British have got air superiority, 44, they're very much using airdrops for a good chunk of their logistics.
Are there any famous stories, anything like that anyone listening would link to who you're representing, that people might have heard of?
Well, General Slim, William Slim, is probably the best example of. If you can read his book, Defeated to Victory, it's excellent. It's probably the best commander's book of the war, because of Slim's ability to write. Getting the whole pressure and what it means to be in command, Defeat into Victory by General Slim is probably the best.
These are the first pictures from Burma since troops of the British Empire began pushing the Japanese back on the Mayu Peninsula. It is the area of Akyab and Arakan. Indian troops are sharing with home regiments the difficulties of this jungle war. These are the men who are doing the job of rejoining this important neighbor of India and China.
The Chindits are probably more well known versus the 14th Army. 14th Army is the Forgotten Army.
Yeah.
And out of that Forgotten Army, one that people do tend to hear of is 3rd Division, 3rd Indian Division, which is the Chindits. So 2nd Division, which we portray, doesn't tend to get heard of as much. So, yeah.
Gradually, our men gained the upper hand. The enemy divisions routed included the cracked 55th, and thousands of them were killed or wounded.
Is there a link that you have yourself to the units, a reason for portraying? Is there a personal link that you have to the reason why you portray?
A few of our relatives were, at least one of our relatives was in the engineers out in second Division, for example. So we've all got family members who are in the forest.
Right.
Imphal has not fallen into Japanese hands, and from the latest dispatches, it appears that in this region, the enemy have shot their boat, losing 750 men after 3 days fighting. The road to Burma remains open.
How many guys have you got in your group?
At the moment, today we've got 4.
Yeah.
At maximum, we've probably got 8.
Quite a small group then.
Quite a small group,
Yeah.
but hopefully growing a bit.
Yeah, very good display, say, for what you've got. Very impressive. All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
And then Eric chimes in, yes, they was in a matchbox in a pantry and he pinched them. The purtiest pair of boll weevils in all Gertshire. And then Jake says, pets, we've never heard of me having any pets. Aren't we? All, did you? And then Mrs. Bennett says, I don't know so much. What about all them pretty pre-war parlour maids we had? Yeah.